You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
Do you remember those big and bulky monitors that were on every computer desk in the 80s and 90s, or maybe as the TV in your living room? These were called cathode ray tubes, or CRTs, and they're one of the earliest forms of electronic displays. Initially, they were used as oscilloscopes before finding their way into TV applications and finally computers. The first commercially available cathode ray TV was produced in 1934 by the Telefunken company in Germany. It cost around $8,000 in today's money. After World War II, TVs would hit the mainstream. The first commercial color CRT was produced in 1954 from RCA researchers. The reason they were so heavy and bulky was that they consisted of an electron gun. The way it works is that these would fire electrons into an array of millions of tiny blue, green, and red phosphor-coated dots. The beam would fire horizontally, row by row, and when the tiny phosphor dots were hit by the beam, they would glow. When you do this rapidly enough, you can form the illusion of a moving image. Despite being inefficient, large, and full of hazardous waste materials, CRT screens pretty much owned the 20th century as the display of choice. If you've ever looked at a calculator display, or an old watch face from the 80s or so, you would have seen a low-power liquid crystal display, or LCD, at work. The way these function is actually pretty interesting. They work on a principle called the twisted pneumatic effect. Basically, an electric field is used to align special liquid crystal molecules between two states. When the molecules are not aligned and twisted, it's an off state. But when a low voltage is applied, they line up and form an on state. By manipulating this effect, you can form basic numbers and letters. In 1972, the first wristwatch featuring the technology was released. It was called the Gruen Teletime. Unlike other displays which could require 40 volts or more to run, this method used hardly any power, and this made them perfect for portable devices like pocket calculators or wristwatches, and as you'll soon see, modern LCDs. Most of you would know what an LED is. It's one of these. The basic principle is, when a current passes through them, they glow. As it turns out, you can use tiny molecules based on carbon to achieve the same effect. This is called an organic light emitting diode, or OLED. When you put millions of these together to form what are known as pixels, you get a modern OLED screen. As described earlier, LCD screens work by using the twisted pneumatic effect, and modern screens still use this technology but on a wider scale. And again, when you put millions of these together to form pixels, this is how we get our display technology. So here's a question. How do you control these things if you have millions of pixels on a screen? Well, as it turns out, there's a tiny transparent grid of wires with each pixel having 3 transistor switches. So why 3? Because within each pixel, there's typically 3 subpixels, a red, green, and blue one. These tiny transistors control the level of brightness of each subpixel by using a tiny voltage. To represent a single color, as per the instructions of a graphics driver, the transistor will vary the brightness of the green, red, and blue subpixels separately. Combine millions of these subpixels together, and you get an image. The fascinating thing is that the driver can only control one row at a time, but the speed at which the rows are able to update is so rapid that our eyes perceive it as one complete image. This technique is called an active matrix display and was first introduced by the Westinghouse Electric Corporation in 1974. So when you touch and navigate your phone, you can use 2 fingers to pinch and zoom or perform gestures. But it always wasn't this way. This technology is called capacitive multitouch. The origins of multitouch began at CERN and a number of US and Canadian universities in the 1970s. CERN began using multitouch screens as early as 1976. Multitouch technology is capacitive as opposed to resistive, which was a kind of touch technology that you had to use force in order to register a touch. Think ATM screens. Between 1999 and 2005, the company, Fingerworks, developed multi-touch devices for those with wrist injuries and the disabled. And from here, we're all set for the modern day. Now that we've seen how we got to where we are today, let's look at the latest trend in mobile technology, high refresh rates. This basically updates the screen at more times per second, enabling smoother screen operation. The result is a device that feels faster and is more responsive. It's proved popular in the Android world and also on the iPad Pro, but the iPhone still hasn't adopted the technology. For those of you not aware, Xiaomi is the third largest phone manufacturer in the world. We'll talk about some behind-the-scenes aspect of smartphone screen technology using their latest phone, the Mi 10T Pro, as a case study.
So when we made this display as one of our flagships, we decided that we wanted an industry-leading refresh rate. We wanted to be really power efficient. We wanted to have industry-leading color performance. And above all else, especially for me personally, but this is something that we worked on really hard for this, we wanted really, like a really healthy experience for the eyes. So we set out with these 4 goals in mind. From there, we designed the hardware that's going to enable this. And then from that, so we're building on pillars here. We're building on the user need, we're building on the hardware that will support it, and then we build the software that will support that will enable this and make the best use of content that you're going to be viewing.
In order to save battery life, Xiaomi has a technology called Adaptive Sync, which has 7 stages from 30 Hz all the way up to 144 Hz.
So rather than forcing 144 Hz, no matter what you're looking at, let's say you're looking at a still image, 144 Hz isn't doing anything for you there, but it's still consuming the same amount of battery life because you're refreshing more than twice the times per second compared to 60. By lowering the amount of times that the refresh rate, or the screen refreshes per second, you're lowering the battery consumption. Overall, for us, this has contributed to 8% more battery life.
The phone actively analyzes what's being seen on the screen in order to choose the most optimum refresh rate.
So the hardware has absolutely no idea. And this is an issue that I believe other providers have been having. But the software is constantly taking a look at what you're watching. So if you're watching a video, it knows that it's 24, it's 25, it's 30, or it's 60 FPS. So it's analyzing that. It's analyzing what you're doing and deciding what refresh rate to use intelligently.
The company has actually built in-house software for evaluating if the phone is correct in what refresh rate it chooses for various content. And I think this is a pretty solid idea.
So it's checking both, are we refreshing at the right rate, and is the content being displayed at the right rate?
Also, in my opinion, I'm not sure how many people would notice the difference between 144 Hz and 120 Hz, but I can see a slight difference when it's lowered to 90 Hz, and regular 60 Hz screens now just feel choppy. Another screen technology Daniel and I talked about was reading mode. Reading Mode 3.0 is the latest iteration of a screen technology that intelligently adjusts the screen's output to reduce eye strain and maximize eye protection.
Eye health is actually like a pretty core concern. I think a lot of people, myself included, we spend 6+ hours per day on a screen. One of the most dangerous things for our eyes, for like our natural rhythms and our sleeping schedules, is blue light. So first, we added a 360-degree light sensor. One of these is under the display and the other under the camera module. What this does is analyze ambient lighting and adjust to determine optimum brightness, so that your phone isn't blinding you while you scroll in dark conditions. Now finally, we optimize our reading mode to reduce blue light. This is done on the software end. And this even offers a paper reading mode, which is similar to the conditions that are achieved by modern e-readers. No, I think it's definitely a possibility. Current technology has a few steps before it's going to get to this point. I think it really depends on which way you want to move with that, right? Do you want to take current e-ink displays and do you want to evolve them to have more capabilities? Or do you want to take our current displays, our current display technologies, and give them e-ink capabilities? I personally favor the latter, where we add more functionality to the devices that we carry all day anyways. I don't know if you or your viewers are aware, last year we released a concept phone, our Mi Mix Alpha. So Mi Mix Alpha featured a folded screen, where the screen was folded around the entirety of the device. Now, this is slightly different than a folding screen, obviously, in utility, but this is more of a proof of concept and us exploring the boundaries of how we can actually adapt displays. We do have a prototype that we have announced online of our folding screen device. It requires more engineering than simply the display. And personal feelings on this, I don't think current iterations that we've seen on the market are really up to snuff. It's cool and it may be a big element of the future, but when we do it, we want to do it 100%. We want it to be correct. So we'll do it essentially when we're ready.